Okay, so class, it's our privilege to welcome Professor Ingrid and her team to talk to us about trauma. Professor, the time is yours from now on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for reading that bio. You all, one of the things that we like to say as a team, so thank you so much, is that when we do our presentations, especially to future or current leaders in helping professions, which is what all of you are, we want to say we're all in this together. And yeah, I may be older and may have experienced more years, but we are in this together. And so as we share today, thank you again for that kind introduction. Just want you to know, again, we'll say that we are in this together. I do want to introduce our team. So my now professional colleague, Mary Guyan, who many of you may know there's a connection. She is now a colleague in the field, and I'm very proud to call her a colleague. And she is along with us today. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy work schedule at this point to join us. We also then have the amazing interns at the center. You will see Sarah Riedel, apologies, Laya Burgos, Eric Pena, and Jasmine Johnson. So they are clinical interns within our program that help to support the work that we do. And so we're honored and privileged to be with you. We are loving that you're turning on your videos because we so wish we were there in person, but this will have to do. So thank you. We like to see your faces as we start presenting. Feel free as we start to use the chat as a place to ask us questions. We will try to monitor it. Feel free to raise your hand. We'll try to keep an eye out. Although once we start the PowerPoint, it may not be as easy to see you. So please use the chat. As much as this is a presentation, we also want to engage you if you've got questions. And something our team talked about right at the beginning when we got on was that we have a lot of information to share. You'll see how passionate this team is. But if for whatever reason we are not able to get through all the information today, we are really appreciative of the fact that we have an ongoing relationship with Dr. Guyan. We can always send you information. We could come back another time. We just want this to be the start of a continuation, especially for all of you, in a further understanding of trauma. So Jasmine, let's see our PowerPoint. Jasmine's going to manage our PowerPoint. So Mary, is there anything you would like to say as my colleague as we start this presentation and as the representative who connected us to this?
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. All I would like to say is that this is information that you don't just have to know, but you need to know. Not just because you're going to be clinicians or you're going to be pastors or, wherever you go, because this is learning why people behave the way they do. And, there are times when we also have to sit back and understand why we behave the way we do. So this information answers those why. And when you're in the field, you're dealing with, a certain client who's behaving a certain way, or a church member, this information will let you stop and understand why that is happening. So this is information that you need to have. And especially, I'll be very transparent that in a lot of our communities, especially in the Black and Brown communities, we don't talk a lot about mental health. We don't talk trauma. And this is the place where we're here to talk about it transparently because each of us has gone through some kind of trauma. So this is the International Center for Trauma Education and Care at Andrews University that has been spreading the good news of trauma. And we say good news because we are talking to you about what is trauma, creating awareness, and also coming with solutions on how to deal with trauma. So I hope that you take advantage of this and ask us as many questions as you want to.
Thank you, Mary. So the way we're going to start this is going to scripture, and we've asked Eric to start us out. Eric is a dual degree student, which means he already has his master's in divinity. And so he is our leader in bridging our two worlds, right? The mental health professions, which the theological professions, which many times we live in these separate camps. And it's beautiful to see that intersection. So take it away, Pastor Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. As Ingrid just stated, we're going to start with a Bible text. We're also going to finish with a Bible text. So Exodus 6:9 says, Moses told this to the Israelites, but they would not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and their cruel slavery. Now, what did Moses say to the children of Israel? Next slide, please. Next slide. What did Moses say to the children of Israel? You could go back a little bit. I just want them to be able to see a picture of the children of Israel, right? Before Moses spoke to the Israelites, God spoke to him and assured him that he would deliver his people from Pharaoh's grip and take them out of the land that enslaved them for so many years. He goes on to tell Moses in verse 2 of the same chapter that he would do something new with these people. They would know him in a way that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did not get to know him. He then told Moses to tell them that he was their God and that he was planning to drive them out of the land of Egypt, remove the burden of slavery, and give them a new experience, a land of their own. But when they heard these words flow out of the mouth of Moses, they could not listen because they were broken. And in their mind's eye, the idea of freedom was simply unimaginable. They were slaves, and they would never be anything other than slaves. So, what is trauma? What is trauma? Psychological or emotional trauma is damage or injury to the mind after living through an extremely frightening or distressing event. It may result in challenges in functioning or coping normally after that event. Did the people of Israel experience trauma? Yes. The Bible says that their spirit was broken, their mind was injured, and because of their injuries, they had a hard time moving past their traumatic experience. So God had to literally pull them out of that situation. Trauma can also be understood by seeing it as a deeply distressing or disturbing or life-threatening event that is outside of the normal range of daily experience. Trauma doesn't necessarily have to come from a personal experience. It can also come as a result of learning about a traumatic event or watching someone else live through one. Now, Jasmine is going to tell us a little bit about the different types of trauma.
Thank you, Eric. So we have this really complex definition of what trauma is. And so we kind of want to talk about what's the types, right? Because there's so many different ways that you can experience trauma. So the first one we have is acute, which results from a single incident. So that trauma may happen one time, or you may only come in contact with it once. So for an example, a car accident. That's a single event. Chronic is repeated and prolonged. If we think about the COVID-19 pandemic that all of us are in, that's considered a chronic trauma because it's so long. We've been with like a year, almost over a year now. actually a year and more, a little bit now. So it's weighing on a lot of people. And so complex trauma is varied and multiple traumatic events. They're usually invasive and interpersonal. So you could be experiencing complex and chronic trauma at the same time. And so think of complex trauma as you're just having multiple traumatic events. So if you're doing chronic trauma right now because of the pandemic, if someone's lost a job or lost a loved one, right? That's also complex trauma. Vicarious trauma is a response to an accumulation of exposure to the pain of others. Now, as you guys are all also helping professions as well, you may come in contact with vicarious trauma because you're working with other people who have gone through pain, right? Individuals, it could be your own family members, friends, people who are colleagues as well. And so that's going to be something to keep in mind. And then secondary trauma is a natural but disruptive byproduct of working with traumatized individuals. It can happen quickly, even only one meeting. So while you may be also experiencing vicarious trauma, you could also experience secondary trauma because that person's telling you their story, right? And you're going to take on those burdens as well. And you might experience their trauma. I used to work at a juvenile detention center in Berrien Springs. And a lot of our kids sometimes would tell the things that they've gone through. And you take those things on, and it's a lot like secondary trauma because I would go home with those things. And now I'm at home thinking about what those children have gone through. And also probably it can happen, like I'm thinking about how it affects me as well. And so it might make you nervous, even though you've never experienced that type of trauma that they gone through. You now have this secondary trauma where you're now afraid of the same things because they told you it or because you've listened to it for so long. So these are the different types of trauma. And of course, there's way more, especially if you do more research. There's a lot more, but these are sort of the main ones we want to look at.
Another way to sometimes describe trauma is we say big T and little t trauma. So we just gave you some of the other definitions, but sometimes in layman's terms, we say big T, little t. So big T seem to be the ones that we feel seem to be really obvious, right? If you've experienced war or sexual abuse, or you've witnessed death or crime, these are obviously big T traumas. Then little t traumas might be something that maybe we don't identify as much, like bullying or abrupt moves, maybe even repeated criticism. And so as we think about these things, you can see that as humans, there's probably not one person who has not experienced some form of trauma. And so when we say we're all in this together, not only are we all in this together to help others, but we're all in this together because we each have experienced some kind of trauma. Next slide.
So just to kind of give all of us an understanding of what it looks like in our brains, right? And we'll talk about the stress response next, but just to kind of show you, I'm a visual person, so this for me was really helpful. So I think it might be helpful to you as well. The triune brain was actually coined by Paul MacLean to just describe the different parts of your brain that have different responses. So for example, when you are in a threatening situation, your mind goes into survival brain. And just the same way, if you're feeling emotions, that happens in the limbic system, which we sometimes call the emotional brain. And then longer, more thoughtful thinking happens in the neocortex, which is the thinking brain.
So after we learned about these different parts, I guess these three parts that we just looked at of the brain, we want to touch with you also on something that is called, as you can see here, the stress response. And the stress response is something that God has created in our brain to help us survive. And if you think back about the slide that you just heard about, right, this stress response is seated in the survival brain, right? That's why it's called that way, and connected actually, because everything in the brain somewhat is connected with the limbic system where we experience emotions. And to illustrate that with you a little bit, I want to take you on a walk right now. I Googled a little bit to prepare myself for the story that I will give you now. So I hope you can imagine that with me. But I want to explain to you how you may have experienced in the past, how we actually experience the stress response on a day-to-day basis. So I want you to imagine that you're going for a walk, okay, in Trinidad, and you probably hear birds chirping, right? And singing. You enjoy the sunshine. I know you guys have like about 27 degrees Celsius. That's awesome. We don't here right now. Or maybe it's raining, depending on the season, right? And you see colorful flowers, and the trees are just rich and green. You see plants. It's just idyllic, right? Idyllic. And suddenly, you hear something. There's like a crackle, and then a rustle. And your body already, you can feel that tenses up, right? It's like, what is this? And before you even know what happened, you hear a hiss, and you see a snake. And you can feel your heart beating faster, and maybe you can also feel your breath becoming heavier, right? Because your body responds to that. And the response of that is called the stress response, as you can see here. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flock. Now, I don't know what your response would be in this case. Maybe you would pick up a stick and you would start beating that snake, right? And I see Russell nodding. He says, yes, I would definitely take the stick. So yes, maybe that is your response, right? That is one of your stress responses. Maybe I used to live in Tanzania, and when I was one of my mentors, she was also teaching us Swahili, the language there, and she was like, whenever you see a snake, you don't go and you look, oh, is this a venomous snake? She says, no, you go, you run as fast as you can, because if you look, it's like, it may be too late already. So maybe your stress response is flight, is to run away as fast as you can. Maybe you just freeze. A lot of people just stop, like they can't move, they can't do anything at that moment, they just freeze. Or maybe you fawn, you submit, right? You just give in. It's like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And there is a new one actually that has been fairly recently, I guess, just researched more, is to flock. And it's especially seen in refugees, right? You gather together, you draw on your friends. It's like, what are we supposed to do with the snake, right? This may be a threat to us. That is your stress response. And the stress response is activated in response to a traumatic experience, right? Even though I described you just not necessarily, well, it could be maybe for some people a trauma, but that is more a stressful situation, right? So we need to differentiate those two as well. There's a difference between trauma and stress. Stress is any event or thought that makes you feel frustrated, angry, nervous, it's like fearful, right? And then your body reacts to that. And not every stress is trauma, but we need to remember that every traumatic experience that the people that we are working with is stressful for our brain and for our body. And what happens also is that our brain releases a stress hormone called cortisol that floods our brain, and that makes sure that at this very moment, we don't start to think and reason, okay, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to fight the snake now or not? You're just reacting. And we need to recognize that every single individual reacts in this situation that I just described to you differently. We often ask people, why didn't you do anything? Well, maybe because their stress response was to freeze and they weren't able to do anything, right? Russell, you said, oh yeah, I would pick up a stick, right? I would beat this, I would beat the snake. Maybe that person doesn't react that way. We also need to recognize that sometimes people go through several of them in stages until they recognize, I cannot get out of this experience, so I will just give in. The stress response is important to understand because it helps us to know, to recognize, hey, this is how the person reacts in this situation. This is how I react in certain circumstances.
Okay, we're gonna do a little exercise. And I want you guys to get a piece of paper if you're able to. It can be a blank white piece of paper or a notebook paper, or I have a little sticky note right here. So see if you can go find a piece of paper, and also make sure you have a pencil or a pen, something to write with. It can be a marker as well, whatever you're able to write with. And wait a few minutes, or not a few minutes, a few seconds. Grab a piece of paper and something to write with. Okay, and what I want you to do is on this piece of paper, you're going to draw a picture, just an outline shape of the brain. Now, your brain does not need to be complicated and super artistic and creative. I usually draw mine to look like somewhat like a fish. So do whatever you think looks like a brain. Oh, I messed mine up again. It's, yeah. Oh, Ingrid's, yours looks lovely. Mine looks like a weird, something strange. I don't know. It looks like a speaker bubble thing. But yes, all right. So now what you're going to do is you're going to fold your brain. You can fold it in half like this so you can cover the picture. So your picture should be on the inside. Fold it in half first, the long way. And if you can't see mine, my team is also doing it, so they have better, because I know I have a background on mine. And then you're going to fold it again. So it looks like a little, like a folded in half of the half. There we go. Excellent. Now, where it's folded on those edges, not where this open part is, but on the folded area, let's think about some traumatic events that either we've gone through or we know people have gone through, or that you might have read about. And you guys can put them in the chat. Things that would happen to people, you know, we've talked about some on the big T and the little t, but maybe you have some different ideas. Put them in the chat. I'm gonna have my team read them out because I cannot actually see the chat.
Abuse.
Abuse. Okay, that's a good one. So what I want you to do is take a little bit where the side is and rip some out. And of course, my paper is not working right now. I'm not strong enough. Okay, there we go. So give me another one, please. You should have a little missing piece ripped out.
Been in a war.
A war? Yes, good. Let's rip out another piece. And make sure you're ripping on that folded area. Let's do 2 more.
Maybe loss of a loss of a parent.
Loss of a parent. Yep, that's good. Did someone unmute? I can't hear them. You can also unmute if you don't want to put it in the chat. Feel free to unmute to answer.
Yes, a failed marriage.
Ooh, that's good. Yep, a fair marriage.
Thank you.
So what I want you now to do is open up your piece of paper. And because my brain was very tiny, my holes were a little bit bigger. And so you should see a couple pieces of holes in your brain, right? This is sometimes what trauma does to us. And this doesn't mean that we're walking around with holes in our brains. You know, that's not true. But what it does mean is that some areas of our brains may not be as developed as other people's who haven't gone through those traumas. But that doesn't mean that you can't heal those parts of your brain as well. It's possible to heal. And that's so important, especially working in a helping profession, is to always look at the hope for our patients, our clients, ourselves as well. Because sometimes these issues, we go through them. And so this might be what our brain looks like, but there is healing.
So let's look at some actual brain slides. And for some of us to do a paper exercise like this is very devastating, because then we're saying, well, what is actually happening? And so many years ago, when we realized, we meaning as humanity, we could see that difficult situations affected individuals, even though maybe they didn't have any wounds on the outside, right? And we knew it was affecting them, but we did not know what that meant, what that looked like. And sometimes we would just say to people, well, can't you just get over it? And it wasn't until science started being able to do brain imaging that we realized that traumatic events can actually physically affect our brain, where we knew if somebody hits your leg and you get a bruise, we could see that. That made sense to us as humans, but we did not know what the impact was on the brain until we started having these images scans. And so the paper that we just did illustrates that. What we started seeing in these scans, as you can see on the left-hand side, that's a healthy brain function. On the right, it's an abused brain. Now, mind you, this was not a brain of somebody who was beaten. This was a child that was emotionally abused. So there was bullying, there wasn't a lot of engagement. So you can see the difference in these two brain areas, and notice the prefrontal cortex, right? Where on the brain on the left, there's a lot of activity going on. What about the brain on the right? And so traumatologists started to say, wait, instead of saying to a child or to an adult, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you getting that math? Or what's wrong with you? Why can't you keep a job? Or what's wrong with you? Why are you reacting this way? We want to say, what's happened to you, right? What has happened to you? And understanding that it's probably not a conscious choice. So the difference of what's wrong with you to saying what has happened to you. And so in the field, you see that's Dr. Bruce Perry. He did a lot of research on brain development. He's showing a picture there of a 3-year-old child, and you can't see it that clearly, but a 3-year-old child that again was neglected, but not from food or care, was neglected because he wasn't stimulated. He wasn't talked to. He didn't have eye contact. He wasn't told that he's wonderful, that he's a precious gift. And so this child's brain actually physically grew at different rates than another child, not because of food and nutrition, but because of emotional abuse. And so what we want to share with you is that what happens on the outside does affect us biologically. Now, for someone like me in the field, who's been in the field for 30 years, when these brain images started coming out, because the field of traumatology is not that old, there was this devastation of, but now what? What can we do? We can't go back. but the beautiful message, not just of God's restoration, but even of science, is that now we're seeing, we can see activity in those areas of the brain. We can start to stimulate those areas of the brain. And we're going to talk about some ways of doing that. Now, some obvious ways are obviously talking and meeting with a counselor, right? And starting to acknowledge what's happened to us, not what's wrong with us, what's happened to us, and being able to talk about it, right? And you all in this group here are going into that field. But let's also talk about some other ways, because as Sarah told you about that snake, we were all able to connect with that, right? But what if that snake lives in your house? So let's talk metaphorically now, right? What if that snake is at your school? Or what if that snake is at your place of employment? And you're in that trauma response continuously, right? Because that snake can't, when we cross that snake on the path, maybe we ran away and the moment was over. Where we talk about that one stressful response is over, we're able to come down, go from our sympathetic nervous system into our rest and digest, rest and restore, the parasympathetic nervous system. But if that snake is continuously there, how are we going to handle that? So let's talk about that. What's our next slide?
All right.
Well, that was a lot of information. So because we give you so much information, we like to take a moment to let you kind of take a breather, is what we call it. So for those of us here in Michigan with lots of snow, we love to look at this scene because you're going to see a beautiful beach. For those of you there, you see these beaches probably more often than we do. So take a moment, listen to the music, and just kind of sit in your seat for just a moment before we start going into more information.
So what happened to your relaxation? I want somebody to comment. What happened? Write in the chat or unmute yourself. What happened?
It sounded as though you were having such a nice time, and then it became a horror scene.
Someone wrote in the chat, it changed, right? As soon as the music changed, your brain automatically told your body that something was wrong. That's why your heart jumped and you became more watchful of your surrounding. Those who live with a traumatized brain have difficulty relaxing because while others around them hear peaceful music, they listen to what you just heard on a constant loop. So imagine how it feels to live like that, right? Imagine how it feels for for you to be at the beach with someone and for that person to be enjoying him or herself, but for you to be in this constant state of something is going to happen. Something is going to jump out of the water. Someone's going to come get me. To the person next to you, that doesn't make sense, right? But to you, that's your whole world. Years ago, I went through a traumatic experience that completely changed my concept of myself, of my surroundings, of just life in general. And I found myself living in this state of where I would be with people and everyone would be enjoying themselves and just having a blast and having a good time. But while they doing that, I'm thinking about what's going to happen to me next. I'm thinking about whether or not these people like me. I'm thinking about how horrible my life is. And I could tell that there were times where they would look at me and maybe wonder, like, what's going on with him? But I couldn't come out that mode. I wanted to come out that mode, but I couldn't because my brain was in this constant loop of this horrible, horrific music that kept me in my head and kept me thinking that something was wrong. And that's what traumatized people live with. That's a state that traumatized people live in. But as Mary said at the beginning, there is healing, and that's why we're here this morning to tell you about the healing aspect of trauma.
I love, because we've done the beach scene quite a few times now. Some of the team is a little bit, some of us are immune, some of us are still like, oh, I hate this thing. But I love now to just watch everyone else's reactions, and they were fantastic. Some people were very stone cold, like, Others were like, huh? It was just really cool to watch how you guys reacted to what was happening. And like Eric talked about, everyone's going through a different experience, right? And what you're feeling at the beach may not be what someone else is feeling at the beach. Their heightened response is different. So we talked about cortisol before, and Sarah talked to you about this analogy of you walking and there's a snake, right? And so the importance of cortisol is that it does help you with your stress response. It helps you to react, like Sarah said. But a little is calming in a crisis, but too much causes the opposite. So I actually like snakes. I do. But I guess I have to hang out with Russell because I'm gone. I am not sticking around to find a stick to beat that snake up. I will leave immediately. So Russell, I'm going to find you if there's a snake in the road or something, because I can't do it, right? But when I leave, my cortisol levels, because that was my flight response, my stress response was that I ran away. But when I leave, my cortisol should lower, right? It should drop back down because I'm not in danger anymore. I'm safe. I'm at my house now. But what happens if your cortisol levels don't drop? What happens if you stay in that same response? If your stress is so high that it doesn't relax, you don't go from that parasympathetic to the sympathetic, right? So you can never regulate. You can't go back to your calmness. You're still at that heightened response. And cortisol flooding and staying at that heightened response is really bad for the body. It causes harm on our body. There's a lot of health problems that can happen if we stay constantly in a stressed response. You have to be able to regulate and go back to calm. So let's think about, like Ingrid said, that snake is at your house, right? You're not able to regulate. You stay heightened. No matter where you go, you're still heightened because that snake might still be with you. It's still following you around. You take it to work, you take it to school. Even if it's not a person, it could be anything, a problem, a situation. You're taking it with you and you never regulate back down. But how can we regulate ourselves, right? How can we find healing to return to that calm state of mind, even though our body doesn't want to? We're going to talk about that later on.
Now, how deep is the mud? It says here, depends on the one you ask. I think this is a very profound statement because, as Jasmine just said, we have all gone through different things. And there's people who have experienced war. There's people who have fled the country. There's people who have gone through just horrific, traumatic things. And they might hear someone else talk about their experience and say, well, I went through something worse and I'm fine. I'm not struggling. Why is that person struggling? Just pick yourself up, get up and move on with your life. But the reality is that because of the way our brain is made up, because of the environment we grew up in, our genetic makeup, there's some things that may not affect you, but it surely affects somebody else. As you notice here, these two dogs walked into the same mud hole, one after another. The big one walked right through the hole, came out, and basically dusted it off because the mud just reached the bottom part of his leg. Now the small dog, he almost drowned. He almost died because the mud almost covered his whole body. Now, imagine how the small dog would feel if the big dog says, hey, just brush it off. Just walk it off and continue living your life. I mean, the small dogs know how he felt at that moment. So the point that we're trying to illustrate is that we all go through the same thing, but we experience it in a different way. So we need to have compassion for each other. We need to be able to say, maybe I overcame something, but this person, for whatever reason, is not able to do so, but not think of yourself as being greater or being stronger, but just realizing that the way that you're made up, that has nothing to do with you and the way you grew up, that affects the way you react to certain things. So we need to be compassionate for each other and realize that I mean, we're on the same boat and we need to take care of each other. That's what we're here for. And that's why you guys are taking this class, right? Because you want to be able to counsel. And it's interesting, just real fast. I mean, as I begin to do counseling, I realized that there's things that people say to me, there's things that people are struggling with that I'm like, yeah, that's not a big deal. In my mind, I'm saying that's not a big deal to me. But when I look at the person's expression, when I look at his or her face, I could tell, man, this is a big deal for them. So I need to be able to say, how can I help you? How can I make this better for you? And that's the point of this slide.
And just to add to it, if we can go back to the slide, just to kind of contextualize it, I know that in the Caribbean, many a times we say, you're soft, boy, you're soft, and if someone is going through something and people always expect you to be strong, or you had to be strong, you had to go through it, you had to do oh gosh, why are you being soft, man? I could get through this. What's wrong with he? Why he can't do this? This is why he can't do this, because you don't know what happened in his or her life to not be able to respond to stress the way you would have responded to it. So the next time when, we all have a set response to things that we say to people, because I got through it, you should be able to get through it too. Just remember that no, you yourself don't need to be strong and hard and you soft, so that's a wrong thing. Just remember that that shouldn't be your response, versus you dial back and say, wait, what really happened there? Let me just stop and not say these things, because when someone is going through a certain situation and you think you're trying to help, by these are affirmations in the culture, but they're not really affirmations. They're actually putting the person in a worse place than they already are in. So like Eric said, you stop and ask, how can I help you? Or even if you don't have words, maybe just being around with that presence of help is all you need to do, just being there. So just to put that in context. Now, we're going to talk about intergenerational trauma, right? Intergenerational trauma basically just means trauma that is passed down through generations, like literally. You know, for the longest time, we wondered why a certain group behaves a certain way, why you're not able to pick up yourself and, pick up yourself by the bootstraps and keep moving along. Why and why? It's because there's something called intergenerational trauma, right? Now, this is caused due to epigenetics. Now, I'm just going to read a study that said that so the findings, the authors concluded, supported an epigenetic explanation. The idea is that trauma can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes, which then is passed down to subsequent generations. So trauma can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes, which is passed down to subsequent generations. The mark doesn't directly damage the gene. So there is no gene alteration, there's no gene, real change happening there, but the mark is directly damaging the gene. So there's no mutation. It alters the mechanism by which the gene is converted into functioning protein or expressed. The alteration isn't genetic, but it's epigenetic. So it's not like there's a mutation of like some sort of trauma getting into your DNA, but it alters the way your DNA would function. So for example, when there are 3 examples here, right? We look at European wars, we look at how the African people were enslaved by colonizers, and even India was colonized. Trinidad also was colonized. So we see the science has shown that the behaviors of our ancestors has passed down to us. So if I give you an example of, actually, I want to talk about what Delmon said in the chat. He said that in the Caribbean, how you're always telling people you're not good for nothing. You're not good for X, Y, and Z. Now think about it. If you're sitting at home and you have your great grandmother, your grandmother sitting there, and you're in that presence, and they're talking about how, you're good for nothing. You can't do nothing with life. You'll make nothing out of life. Think about how that's going to impact you as a person. You're going to believe that my grandmother said I'm not good for anything. My great grandmother said I'm not good for anything. You're going to believe that, and you're going to pass that good for nothing attitude, approach to your child. So you've intergenerationally passed it because someone told your grandmother that she was not good for something. So if we look at, enslaved people, the colonizers told them that they were good for nothing. The women were treated as if they were only baby making machines. The men were beaten and treated as animals to work in the fields. So they thought that they had nothing to do with their brain. They were just muscle mass. So they didn't actively pursue education. But there were some that were anomalies who said, no, I think I can study more. Like, Frederick Douglass, who said, I think I can go to college because someone somewhere told him, maybe you can try and, read something, and that stuck to him. We're going to talk about resiliency factors too. So I know all this information is really scary, but I promise you we have solutions. We're going to talk about resiliency, and you're all very resilient people. So please let us not scare you in the beginning right now. So that is intergenerational trauma, essentially trauma that can be passed from generations. And we're seeing research that has happened in Holocaust survivors. When they did a DNA study, they saw that, Holocaust survivors, fifth generation, has higher likelihood of anxiety, depression, PTSD, simply because of what has happened to them. They heard these stories. They observed their grandparents behave a certain way. You're always sometimes you see some people trying to make sure that they're covered, they've like taken care of only themselves. And you're like, that person, real selfish boy. But that's because of how life has been and the intergenerational trauma that is passed on to them. So
thank you, Mary. And I think just picking up on what she shared, right? And even though it does sound scary, the beauty about epigenetics and what she just shared is also that we can pass on this resiliency to the next generation. Just as we could pass on trauma, we can pass that on too. So you all being here and receiving this information, you can equip yourself, your family, the people that you will be working with, and help them not to pass it on. Because whenever we work on our trauma, we choose to not to pass it on to the next generation. So even within that, even though it has a awakening part, right? But this awakening is important because it raises it to the level of our consciousness. I want to talk with you briefly about triggers so that we can move into the promised, what we said already slides ago, into the promised techniques of how we can build that resiliency, right? We have a cinnamon slide here, and I want to engage you right now. I need you to become active here, right? What is it? Either speak up, put it in the chat. What do you think of when you think of the smell of cinnamon? What does it remind you of? Can you do that for me? What does it remind you of when you think of the smell of cinnamon? Abuela. Oh, thank you. Ah. And then apple pie. Yes. Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Tea. Yes, Russell. Thank you so much. Cinnamon rolls we have. Porridge. Oh, yeah. It's so yummy in porridge. Indian curries. There you go. Okay, now I want you, as the responses here coming into the chat, I want you to think about as like, what is it that you were feeling or you're connecting with that? And that is really positive feelings, right? Usually it's like, oh, I like cinnamon rolls, or I like porridge, right? That feeds my stomach. It fills me. So yes, that's great. And we are choosing that actually because we know that usually this is a positive response. But however, we actually did that once, or Professor Slickers did that once in one of our presentations. And she always has, this is empty, I need to get a new one, but she has a jar with cinnamon, right? And she asks a volunteer to come up, and she doesn't tell them what she's gonna let them smell. And she opens the bottle and asks this woman to smell and say, what does this remind you of? And of course, we're all expecting to hear porridge or cinnamon rolls, so it's something positive. And this woman smells it and says, this smells like the woods that we ran through as we were fleeing from the soldiers back in my country. Cinnamon was for this woman a negative trigger, right? As when we smell this, think of positive experiences, this woman had a negative experience connected to it. You remember the snake story that I shared with you at the beginning, right? When you had a bad experience with a snake, you may be triggered because you see just a branch on the ground and you think, oh my goodness, this is a snake. And immediately it brings you back into this situation. It reminds you of that. It brings you back to the scary circumstance that you've been in. And our body feels it immediately. We need to remember, I think actually the Seventh-day Adventist Church in theory is great about the reality that we have a body and mind connection, right? At least that's what we teach. I wonder, do we practice it? Because we very often dismiss what our body feels and say, that's not important. You just got to get through. Hey, I'm from Germany, right? And I grew up and my mom has such a high work ethic. Like, you ain't being sick to go to work. You go, right? You go to work. Like, you need to have a high fever or whatnot to be able not to go. That is within me. And it's good in a healthy way, right? To have a high work ethic is good, but it can become unhealthy. So again, listening to our body and what it feels and recognizing that as we may experience these triggers throughout our lives.
Okay, so I don't think we need the slide. I just want to see everyone's faces. Okay, so Esme, I know I can see some of you have turned off your cameras. I don't know if you would be very generous to show us your beautiful faces this morning, the rest of you, and make us feel the warmth of the Caribbean that I want to be in. Russell, we can't hear you.
I said hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hey, let me tell you, this 27 degrees y'all have there, please send some. All right. So we've been talking about a lot of things, with the brain, the cortisol levels, but we also like to talk about the brain in depth because, as you grow into your field of work, understanding people, we like to give you some, I think, like tangible tools or just tangible thought. Like I always think about this when I am working with someone who is being very challenging. So I want you all to first lift your hands, your left hand or right, whatever you like. And I have a glove, which is the brain model. Sorry, you all don't have it, but you could buy one off Amazon. So this is your brain right now, okay? So if you look at it, I'm going to bring it close to the camera. This is your prefrontal cortex, which is essentially your big brain, right? This is where you have all your kind of logic and, let me solve that math problem. Let me solve that physics problem. So this is where it happens. Now, this is your little brain, this little piece here. If you could see the hippocampus, your amygdala, this is your little brain, which is so important, even if it is little, because this is where all that feeling stuff happens. This is where you love someone. This is where you're angry. This is where all those emotions are right here. So usually your brain is like this. Everyone put your little brain inside, tuck it in, give it a little love. Okay. And then close it with your big brain. So it is essentially protected by your big brain. So for a normally functioning brain, you see, this is how it looks. This is your brain, right? Now, you're functioning every day, and suddenly you have all this homework that Dr. Guyan gave you. But you also have a child to take care of. You have a job to go to. I see Wonder shaking head like, yes, I know what you're talking about. I feel you. So, you have a child to take care of, you have bills to pay, you have all of these things to do. So you are stressed, right? You feel the stress of all of this. So your brain starts kind of like shaking a little bit. And what happens is you flip your lid. Like everybody now, flip your lid. Right? So although it's not going to happen physically, when you're walking around, you're not going to see people with flip lids, but you have lost contact between your big brain and your small brain. So now your brain is not functioning normally because your little brain is not protected by your big brain. That connection is lost. So all your thinking is from your little brain. Now you're only emotional, you're angry, you're vexed at your wife, you vex at your husband, you vex at your child, you vex at Dr. Guyan for giving you all this homework. You just vex. You don't know how to manage your stress. So you remember when we spoke about stress response? Now for someone who's gone through certain traumas in life, does not know how to work with their stress, right? So they're just going to walk around with a flipped lid throughout the day. Versus someone who's, say, grown up in a home where there was safety, there was food, your parents always coming and saying, I love you, your siblings, you have normal sibling relationship, will know how to regulate the stress and will be like, okay, so these are the things I need to do. They will plan it, write it down, and sit down and be like, all right, we'll be able to bring back this flipped lid onto their little brain. and be able to work through their tasks. I'm not saying that once your brain has come back from being flipped to normal, that you're not going to be stressed. You're still going to be stressed, but you're not going to lose connection between your big brain, which is your thinking brain, and your emotional brain. You're not going to lose that connection. You will be able to function in stress. Your cortisol levels will go down. Remember the cortisol flooding that we spoke about? That could cause a lot of health problems that we see in, a lot of our communities: high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol. Your cortisol levels are high because you're always stressed. But when you come back to this position, you're still stressed, but you know how to work through life while being in that stress. So this is a tangible representation of how your brain functions. And flipping the lid is something that Dan Siegel talks about. So when we send you resources, we'll send you a video about, more information about what he talks about flipping the lid. And we are going to move towards solutions of how, when you have a flipped lid, how you can bring it back to normalcy, because we all flip our lids. We all do. But it's just how you come back to regulating it is what's important. Thank you for participating. I see all of you turn off on your cameras. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary. And so as many of you know, you're in the mental health professions. We know that there are many interventions, right? And some of them change over time. 10 years ago, we did not use a lot of the same interventions that we use now, right? But what's so crazy is we always come back to the basic needs, which I don't know if you guys have heard of, for example, the Calm app. How many of you have heard of it? Just raise your hand or put a little reaction. You can put a little thumbs up. So the Calm app is actually an app that you can listen to, different meditations, different sleep techniques, that kind of thing. And during the meditations, they have like birds chirping, sometimes the rain falling, some of these things that are naturally calming you down. And this is in an app. But guess what? This is what has already been given to us. This is really what our health message is about, right? It's about these basic things that we do, like being in nature, sleeping, getting enough sleep, exercising, having enough sunshine. And believe it or not, we're deprived of a lot of these things on a day-to-day basis. So this helps us to deal with our problems and make it a little bit more bearable. And what are some other God-given solutions? We have different things like going outside, reading a book to your child, or having a meal with someone, right? Listening to music, being in a church community. And actually, you might find this interesting. We talked about cortisol earlier, right? So actually, research shows that a fun and calming environment reduces cortisol by 50% within 7 to 14 days. So what do we need exactly here? Is it just about eating food? Is it just about making time for certain things? Yes, but you need to be intentional. We need a sense of predictability in our lives, and that's what it's about. We need structure and some kind of repetitive things that we put into our lives, right? And we know that God is a God of order. And it's not something that is, put upon us that we need to do things a certain way. It's more of, this is how he knows we work, and we need these basic needs, because let me tell you, you cannot work on these more deep traumatic experiences if you don't have the basic needs of food, water, and rest, and some of these other things that you can do.
Thank you, Laya. In order to help people heal from trauma, we need to provide trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care entails three important and inseparable things. First, creating a safe environment. Second, supporting and teaching emotional regulation. And third, building relationships and connectedness. Creating a safe environment consists of constructing a place where people are not negatively judged because of their past experience or experiences, but positively judged because of their desire to move forward. In a safe environment, the question, what is wrong with you, is non-existent because it has been replaced by what happened to you. And even more important, how can I help you move past your past? Supporting and teaching emotional regulation consists of accepting the reality that emotions are part of what makes us human. So instead of doing away with emotions, we need to know how to define what we feel and learn to deal with those feelings, especially the bad ones. Lastly, building relationship and connectedness has to do with our ability to go beyond simply feeling sympathy for others, but embracing a genuine sense of empathy. There is a difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy simply means understanding someone else's suffering, while empathy means experiencing someone else's feelings. And that is what trauma care is all about.
Okay, we're gonna go through some breathing techniques, and I decided to stop sharing because I want you guys to see me fully as much as you can with my background, but also so you can see the rest of the team and we can see you guys as well. So, different breathing techniques. The first one we're going to talk about, this is how to regulate, right? Get back to that calm feeling. If you're heightened at your stress response and you're like, hey, I can't leave my house right now, or I don't know, I've drinking all the food, I've drank all the water, eaten all the food. I mean, you could have drank it if it's porridge, someone said before, you know, but you do all of that, but you're still at that heightened area, you're still stressed. Here's some ways that we can do breathing to regulate. So you're going to take your hands, clasp them like this if you want, and you're going to put them behind your head, and you kind of want to stretch it out, and then you're going to take some deep breaths in and blow it out long, though. Make sure your out breath is very long. So let's breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Make sure you breathe out through your mouth. Let's do one more. And you can lean back. Yep. And this kind of helps to stretch open the chest to kind of get the oxygen flowing through your body easier. And they also call this the businessman stretch because, you know, businessmen do the little, yeah, like the cool thing. They think it's cool, but it's actually helping them breathe as well. So another one is our favorite. We call it pizza breathing. But if you don't like pizza, you guys can put in the chat what your favorite food is, right? Whatever you want to, it can be what you feel like eating right now.
Roti.
Roti? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Sounds good. Yes. Anybody else? Curry. Yes. Curry.
Pilau.
What'd you say?
Pilau.
That sounds good. Yes. Anything else? Breaded cheese. Okay. Soup. Yes. Sounds good. So pretend that it's in your hand. I want you to put your hand out like this. And you're going to pretend that it's in your hand sitting there. And so you're going to smell in all the flavors, like the curry. It could be, oh, there's so many different spices in curry, you know, we can't even name them all. And so smell it. You want to breathe it in, right? So you can kind of take your hand and breathe in those spices or whatever you want to eat. Breathe it in. Just smell it. It smells so good. But wait, oh no, guys, it's hot. It's really hot, right? So now we got to blow on it to cool it down. So blow out. Make sure it's long though. Blow it all out because you got to make sure it's cooled down so we can eat it. So let's try one more time. Breathe it in. Now blow on it because it's too hot. And this is a great way to just tell anyone, hey, you seem like you need to calm down. All you have to do is kind of go like this. Just put your hand out. And it's kind of like common language because as soon as they see that, they'll think, oh, I need to breathe in and breathe out. I need to relax and calm down. Another way we say this is breathe in grace and breathe out praise, right? We breathe in grace, but our praise should be continually in our mouth, like God wants us, right? To be always praising. So it needs to be longer. So your in breath is short, but your out breath is really long. So you're breathing out praise to God. And so those are some great ways. I believe we also have something called the foghorn. Who's doing our foghorn? I can do the foghorn.
I think Sarah was up for doing the foghorn. We want to teach you all these techniques because we have a lot we get excited about. And the reason we're teaching you these techniques is because these are some God-given ways, right? His first gift to mankind was breath. When he formed Adam, he breathed into him. And what's so beautiful is that science is now proving all these things. And so the foghorn, I'll just teach you really quick, has to do with stimulating the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It starts in the cranium. And basically, we want to breathe in through our nose. And when we breathe out, we want a low to almost vibrate noise. So you breathe in and then you breathe out, ooh, almost low to vibrate. And I know it sounds funny, and I'd have us all practice, but because of time, what I want to share with that is the researchers that are looking into the polyvagal theory say that the way to stimulate that vagus nerve is not only to do that foghorn noise, but to sing loudly and to hum songs. What better way? We're back to breathing in grace, breathing out praise. It's stimulating our brain. It's helping to connect our body. These are God-given interventions that now science is proving, right? So many of us say, you know what? My grandma went through such hard times. She used to hum all the time. She'd hum hymns. Maybe that's part of her resiliency of what was helping her cope with everything that was going on. And we have a lot to share as far as things that we can do to be resilient, right? We talked about these pillars of trauma-informed care for each other, safety, relationships, community, the importance of touch, which right now we're having a hard time finding because we're just not together. But these are God-given tools, the sense of community. And so as you go into the world of service, we encourage you, and we'll send you some resources to think through what are some things that God has given us already, right? We're not saying it's not important to do counseling, but a walk in nature does amazing things to our brain. I've done some, it was mentioned, I've been in refugee camps where we talk to people. These are people that are confined with almost no hope. But if we can encourage them to do some of even these techniques, and so what are some things we can do in this world where that's so devastating? Mary, can you wrap us up talking about the importance of relationships with the experiment of a monkey, and then we will wrap up our time together.
Okay, so we talk about community. We love community because that is a resiliency factor. And just to define resiliency, it is the ability for humans to bounce back. So remember, your brain is a muscle. When you go through long-term healing things like therapy, your brain is, teaching itself to grow back to, those spots that Jasmine spoke about, to heal. So community is one of the biggest factors in resiliency. So quick story. There was this one monkey. Some terrible scientists did this experiment. So they put the monkey in a cage and started poking the monkey, like troubling it, poking it, not feeding it for days. And it was just angry. So it would just make all kinds of sounds and be beating around the cage. And then they decided that, okay, now that we've troubled the monkey so much, let's check its blood sugar levels, blood pressure levels, cortisol levels, and did all these health screenings. And they found that they were very high, like beyond charts. So if your blood sugar is supposed to be, your HbA1c is supposed to be like a 6, it was at a 12. So just exponentially high. Now what they did next is they introduced another monkey in that same cage, did exactly the same things. Poke the two monkeys, didn't feed them, didn't give them water, troubled them, made all these sounds, kept them in the dark. After they had tortured them enough, they again decided to take the same health screening. So they did the blood sugar, pressure, cortisol levels, and they found that both the monkeys, especially the monkey that was alone, all these levels had reduced by a 50%. So what changed was there was someone for this monkey to share his trauma with. So community is where you're able to share your trauma with. We always say this: what's shareable is bearable. So if you can build a community, and if you yourself can be that safe space for another person, you're building community with each other. You're able to lower your levels of cortisol, your levels of risks of different heart diseases by a half when you have a good community. It's just like Professor Slicker said, we're not able to see each other right now, but creating that space, like this space right here, is community. We're not able to touch and do all of that, but just talking to each other, communicating, presence, this is community. So it's very important for us to build that community. And one last thing that I want to say is it also is very biblical, because we saw that in the days of Acts, people ate together, people sold their property to pay for each other's school. Ain't nobody doing that now, but people did all these amazing things to come together, break bread together, and they were so much more of a healed generation because they came together, they shared and bared each other's traumas. So let's aim to be that community for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. We share that story because the power of presence, right? That maybe that monkey didn't know what to say, and sometimes we don't know what to say, but just being there together. We've shared some pretty devastating things with you, but our trauma center clings to our verse. Jasmine, do you mind putting it up? The verse that we cling to is Romans 15:13. And we just want to leave you with this one. May the God of hope, right, fill you with joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you can overflow. And that's what we want for each of you, that we're filled by the God of hope, and then we can overflow into each other, because we are all here together to help and support each other. Thank you very much. We will send you some resources. You can reach out to Dr. Guyan too if there's something you would want specifically. But thank you again for the invitation, Dr. Guyan.
Professor Slickers and the team, I think I will just say one word and leave my class to say a few words, and that is thank you very much. Okay, class, I know you have to run for the next class, but if one or two of you share a few words, I will appreciate it.
Yes, I am thankful to Professor Ingrid and our entire team for presenting such wonderful information to us. It was a lot to grasp at once, but it was so good. And I'm so thankful that, I was saying another lecture this morning, but what I received was so much more than just a lecture. It was you guys presenting trauma in such a way that was real. It was so informative, and it was as though I was getting direct life experience of trauma. And I am so thankful for the class session. It was so good. I am enjoying it, and I feel that it should be done at least once more. And I just want to say thank you, Sarah. I forget to mention her name in my times in the chat, and I just want to thank you all for the presentation today. It was wonderful.
I want to join with my colleague Dalman in saying thank you to Professor Ingrid and her team. It burns my heart inside. This is real. It's real. It's real. And I was sharing with Mary. I private message her, and I was telling her that I started social work in Guyana. I did 2 years, and on my 3rd year, I started theology. And this morning, it's something just sparked in me that I think I will complete my degree in social work, because this is ministry, and listening to you guys, it awakens so much in me, and I'm so thankful for the experiences you guys shared, and it's a blessing. It's my heart is filled. It's really it's a blessing. Thank you once more.
Professor Slicker, there is a request in the chat. Okay, it says
Yes.
it begs for a part 2. Whenever you are available, we are available.
We love part 2s. We'd hang out with you guys all the time. Can you tell that we're pretty passionate about this information? And even former students like Mary, who are out in the field, are so passionate. They still join us in sharing this information. So yes, we can be in touch and we can come back and share. But students, please know that our center is here to support you. You've now met all these people, our interns that are going to go out in the field. All of you are going to go out in the field. We are a large world community that we need to support each other. So what we just built here, you now have met us. Find us, reach out to us. We're in this together to support each other. And, like I say, and take everyone with us to heaven, right? That's what we're doing. We're going to stop asking, what's wrong with you? We're just going to say stuff has happened to you and we're going together.
Okay. Thank you very much once again. The students need to go for the next class. So we will log off now. But thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you as you are doing the great job for Him. God bless you all.
See y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Nice
Bye,
having
bye.
you guys.
Do return, please. Don't make sure they return before the semester is over.
They have to from us.
You guys are an awesome audience. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
doing this with us.
I will give the honor of my guests to log off first. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
There's always that.
protocol.
Who logs off first?
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. God bless.
Oh, okay, class. So you can put your comments in our group chat in WhatsApp, and then yes, I can organize it once again. Okay.
Amen.
That's all for today. Thank you very much.
Is it something you always do in this class?
You are the most privileged one. For
Yes.
the first time I did it.
Say it again. We are always
Yeah, we always the most privileged one.
Yes, seriously, we always
We are the trend. We are the ones who are the perennial
Trendsetter.
guinea pigs.
No, the trendsetter, man.
They're the perennial guinea pigs.
See, this is the blessings of the virtual world.
Trendsetter.
Yes.
We couldn't imagine of having people from Andrews to come and talk to us.
True.
Okay. Those of you who are in my church history class, I am actually planning mission history class. Actually, I am actually planning, and one or two of them have already consented, some general conference officers who will come and talk about the history of the church.
Wow.
In this class.
So we missed that one.
Yeah.
If you, well, I will invite you all. You know, those of you who have already done the class, if you still have time and want to come and listen,
Of course.
I will invite you to do so.
Yes, Doc. Thank you.
All right, then. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
All right.
Next week, we don't have class. The following week, we have class.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Bye.
All right.